In this video, I want to go over an update I made to the omegamouse.talon file as of commit 54D74C3. I added two settings you can customize: gaze capture interval right here and head tracking delay right here. These let you tweak a couple of response times in OmegaMouse without having to go looking through the Python code yourself. You can probably see that the file looks a bit different from my previous video on this Talon file. I have a header up here for settings and a header here for voice commands. And obviously, this whole block about the Omega Mouse cursor time intervals. My friend gave me some feedback about how to make Omega Mouse more inclusive. It was regarding a common condition that makes people blink a lot, or even just people with dry eyes. So I added these settings in the Talon file to hopefully help out a bit with that. To understand what these settings do, let's recap how Omega Mouse works. So first, when you make a popping sound, gaze tracking turns on for 50 milliseconds by default to capture your gaze point. Afterwards, gaze tracking turns off, and head tracking turns on 50 milliseconds later. Now, you can customize these time intervals for yourself. So, gaze capture interval will let you set the amount of time the gaze tracking is active to capture your gaze point before it turns off. The head tracking delay will let you set the amount of time between gaze tracking turning off and head tracking turning on. Now, we are talking about milliseconds here, so these are not very impactful settings, but they will allow you to tweak these parts of the code in case the capture or response times are too fast or too slow for you by default. So these two settings will apply to all modes, and when you change them, they will not require Omega Mouse to be restarted. You just have to save the file. This is in contrast to how the mode selection works here, where when you change this value, you do have to restart Omega Mouse. You can see here that I also say the settings in total of both of this and this should be under 1800 milliseconds, and you have to use the quotes when you write your value. Now, the reason why I say it should be under 1800 milliseconds is because Talon monitors activity in 2-second intervals, and it will throw up a warning if it doesn't detect activity in that time span. And actually, just to note, the settings that you put here actually it sets Talon to sleep for this amount of time, so no activity will be able to run in Talon while it's sleeping here. And these two actions happen back to back in the code. So if the total of these two values exceeds 2000 milliseconds, it will set off the warning in Talon, even if it's kind of close. So that's why I've specified under 1800 milliseconds just to give it a buffer to be safe. Honestly, I don't see anyone setting the values this high, so it's just more informational. Now, it's also possible if you set these settings too low, Omega Mouse may not work properly, but you'll have to test it out for yourself. I've had mixed success with going lower, mainly for the gaze capture interval here. So now let's demonstrate how these settings work. I'm going to be using light mode, and I will try to move the cursor from tab to tab here as just a sample for how this kind of works. So first thing we'll do is we will just use the default 50 milliseconds. Omega Mouse. Yum. So now let's see what happens if we set gaze capture interval to like 900 milliseconds. Save the file. Yum. As you can see, the cursor is jittery because it is just tracking my left eye, but you can see for those 900 milliseconds, it is using eye tracking, and if I were to blink or move my eyes around, it would be capturing that. Now let's see what happens if we set the head tracking delay to 900 milliseconds as well. Save the file. Yum. You can see there was a long delay before the head tracking actually started once the eye tracking turned off. So now let's see what happens if we were to set gaze capture interval to something low like 10 milliseconds. Save the file. Let's set this to 50 first. All right. Yum. Now let's see what happens if we set the head tracking delay down to 10 milliseconds as well. Save the file. Yum. You can see that some of those times I think the gaze capture was a bit too low, so it wasn't quite capturing my gaze point. Let's try going down to 1 millisecond here. Yum. So you can see there was some mixed results. Some of the times the gaze point did capture even as low as 1 millisecond, but sometimes it didn't. The head tracking delay doesn't seem to be as big of a problem, so you might have better luck messing with that if that's an issue for you. Also, I want to point out that Omega check state will now list the values you set for these settings, which you'll see down here. Omega check state. You can see the gaze window interval and the head track lag settings are listed here. So that's the small update for the omegamouse.talon file. I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.